Clyde Drexler sat down in early 2025, looked straight into the camera, and said something that the entire basketball world was not ready for. He said LeBron James has not earned respect the way Michael Jordan did. He said it calmly. He said it clearly. He said it with full confidence and zero hesitation. And the moment those words hit the internet, everything exploded. Fans started arguing. Former players started picking sides. Sports shows spent days talking about it. And LeBron James, the man who almost never stays quiet when people come at him, said absolutely nothing. Now, a lot of people have seen the clip. A lot of people have heard the headline. But what most people have not heard is everything that came before that moment, the full conversation, the full picture of what Drexler was really saying, and why it hits so differently than the usual GOAT debate noise. That is exactly what we are going to break down today. Because this story is not just about two basketball players. It is about something much bigger. It is about what respect really means. It is about what greatness really costs. And it is about whether the way basketball legacies are built today is the same as how they were built in Jordan's time, and whether it should be. So let's start at the beginning. Let's start with who Clyde Drexler actually is, because that matters more than most people realize.
A lot of younger basketball fans know Clyde Drexler as a name. They know he was good. They know he was from the old school era, but they do not fully understand what that man actually was as a basketball player. Clyde Drexler was not just pretty good. He was one of the most gifted, most complete, most dangerous players the game has ever seen. He could score from everywhere. He could defend. He could pass. He could take over a game in ways that made entire arenas go quiet because people were too busy watching in shock to make noise. He was a 12-time All-Star. He was an All-NBA player multiple times. He made it to the NBA Finals. He eventually won a championship. He is in the Hall of Fame. And more than any of that, he played his entire prime in the same era as Michael Jordan. Not just in the same league, on the same courts, going toe-to-toe with the same man that LeBron James has spent his entire career trying to be compared to. There is a very specific kind of knowledge that only comes from actually being on the court with someone, not watching film on them, not reading about them, not seeing highlights on social media 20 years after the fact. Actually being there, actually feeling what it is like to compete against that level of greatness with everything on the line. Drexler has that knowledge. It is not an opinion he formed from the outside. It is something he lived through, game by game, season by season, loss by loss. And that is what makes what he said in 2025 so different from all the other GOAT debate conversations we have heard 1,000 times. When Drexler talks about Jordan, he is not talking about a myth. He is talking about something he personally experienced. He is talking about a standard he personally felt. And when he says that standard is not being matched, he is not guessing. He is comparing something he lived to something he is watching. That gap between living it and watching it is the whole point.
Now let's talk about how this all started, because the setup matters. In early 2025, Clyde Drexler sat down for what everybody thought was going to be a standard legacy conversation. You know the type. Old school legend comes in, talks about the good old days, maybe gives a compliment or two to the current generation. Everybody leaves happy, and nobody talks about it 3 days later. That is what people were expecting. That is absolutely not what they got. Within the first few minutes of that interview, something shifted. You could feel it if you watch the full video. Drexler leaned forward, his eyes locked in, his whole energy changed. This was not a man who came to be polite. This was a man who had been sitting on something for a long time, and he was done sitting on it. He did not wait to be asked a leading question. He was not pulled into the conversation by a provocative interviewer. He steered the whole thing himself. Unprompted, he brought up LeBron James, and the words that came out were not the kind of carefully thought-out, PR-approved words you hear from most people in the basketball world when they talk about active stars or living legends. These were raw words, direct words, the kind of thing that most people in that world keep completely buried because they know exactly what kind of fire it starts. He talked about how LeBron has built his legacy around controlling the story. He talked about how the difference between LeBron and Jordan is not just about rings or stats. He said it is about how you carry yourself. It is about whether you let the game define you or whether you try to define the game around your own story. And then he said the line that stopped everything. He said you cannot earn respect like Mike, not the way LeBron has gone about it. Just like that. No drama, no build-up, just a clean, direct statement that hit like a punch nobody saw coming. The clip got cut, it got posted, it got shared millions of times before the day was even over. And suddenly, the GOAT debate was not about championships or scoring records anymore. It was about something much more personal and much harder to put a number on. What does it actually mean to earn real respect in this league?
To really understand what Drexler was getting at, you have to think carefully about how Michael Jordan moved through the world. Because Jordan had a very specific way of doing things that was completely different from how things work today. Jordan never asked you to appreciate him. Think about that. He never positioned himself. He never sat down while he was still an active player and carefully constructed how he wanted history to remember him. He never built a media company to make sure his image was always perfect. He never made strategic public announcements designed to shift the conversation in his favor right before something important happened. He just played. He walked onto the court and he played. He competed so hard and so completely that by the time he was done, the respect was not something you gave him willingly. It was something he took from you because there was no other option. You could not watch what he did and walk away feeling anything other than awe. Whether you were a fan or not, whether you liked him or not, whether you wanted to give him that credit or not, you had no choice. That is a very specific kind of greatness, the kind that does not need a publicist, the kind that does not need a documentary, the kind that does not need social media posts and carefully timed announcements. You just had to be in the building when he played, and you understood. Drexler felt that. Every player who competed against Jordan in that era felt that. And they all walked away from their battles with Jordan carrying something they did not have before, a hard-earned understanding of what it feels like to be in the presence of something that is beyond argument. Now, nobody is saying LeBron James is not talented. That is not the conversation. LeBron James is one of the most physically gifted basketball players who has ever lived. His basketball IQ is extraordinary. His ability to see the game, to process it in real time, to make the right play in the biggest moments, all of that is real. The message is that the game alone is not enough, that what happens on the court is not enough on its own to build the legacy you want, that you need extra help. And Jordan never sent that message, not once in his entire career. Jordan's career was not perfect. He had bad moments. He had the gambling stories. He had the first retirement that confused everybody. He came back and struggled for a little while before finding his footing again. None of that was perfectly managed. None of it was carefully packaged. And yet, nobody debates Jordan's place in history. Nobody. The argument never comes up in the same way, because when you think about Jordan, you think about what he did on the court, and that is enough. It will always be enough. It does not need anything added to it. With LeBron, the argument never fully closes, and Drexler is saying that the reason the argument never closes is not because LeBron is not great. It is because the machinery around him introduced a question that will not go away. What is the real version of the story? And once that question gets into people's minds, it does not leave. Doubt, once it is in, is very hard to get rid of.
The people who were not surprised. When the clip went everywhere, the reaction split almost perfectly down the middle, and that split itself tells you something important. On one side, you had the old-school crowd, former players, former coaches, people who grew up watching basketball in the 80s and 90s, and from that community, the overwhelming response was not shock, it was relief. It felt like a pressure valve being released on a conversation that had been building behind closed doors for years and years. The comments from that community were full of things like, "Finally, somebody said it. This is what we have all been thinking. Thank you for being honest." These are people who know the game from the inside, people who lived inside it at the highest level, and they had been watching the modern era slowly rewrite the rules of what greatness looks like. And a lot of them had feelings about it that they had been keeping quiet, because speaking up means becoming a target. It means people call you bitter. It means people say you cannot handle the new generation. So they stayed quiet. But Drexler did not care about any of that. He walked straight into the fire and said what he had to say. On the other side, LeBron's fan base came in immediately and loudly, and that is a massive, passionate, very loyal fan base. The pushback was fast and it was hard. The argument from that side was, look, LeBron operates in a different era. The media landscape changed. Social media changed everything. The business of basketball changed. Judging him by Jordan's standards is like comparing athletes from completely different generations with completely different circumstances. The game evolves.
The players evolve with it, and that is not a completely unfair point. But here is what made Drexler's argument different from the usual generational debate that goes around in circles forever. He was not saying LeBron is lesser because of the era he played in. He was making a much more specific point. He was saying that the relationship between greatness and respect has been changed, that how you build a legacy now is not the same as how it was built before, and that the change has a cost, a real cost, the kind you cannot see on the stat sheet. LeBron's silence and what it might mean. Now, here is the part of this story that is maybe the most interesting, because after all of this, after the clip went everywhere, after the entire basketball world spent days arguing about it, LeBron James said absolutely nothing. Zero. Complete silence. Think about what that means for a second. This is a man who has never been short of words, a man who has responded to criticism publicly many, many times over the course of his career, a man who has spoken up about almost everything, a man who once openly said he was the most talked about athlete on the planet and leaned into that reality. When people have come at him over the years, he has almost always said something back. He has posted, he has given interviews, he has found ways to address things. And when Clyde Drexler, a legitimate Hall of Famer who competed in the same era as the man LeBron has spent his entire career trying to be compared to, looks straight into a camera and says, "You have not earned it the way it is supposed to be earned," LeBron said nothing. There are a few ways to look at that. The first way is that it is completely strategic. LeBron has been in this game for a long time, and he is not a foolish person. He knows that responding to something like this gives it more power. It takes a clip and turns it into a full public war. Staying silent is a power move. It signals that this comment is not worth his time or his energy, that he is operating at a level where something like this simply does not reach him. The second way to look at it is more complicated, and this is the reading that keeps coming up in conversations closest to the story. What if the silence is not a strategy? What if it is the one situation where there is genuinely no clean response available? Because the thing Drexler is saying is not about stats. You cannot pull up numbers to counter it. It is about character. It is about conduct. It is about a feeling that either exists in people or it does not. And feelings are extremely hard to argue against. You can fight a number. You cannot easily fight a feeling. There is an understanding that the machinery around him exists for a reason,
And that reason is because the basketball, as extraordinary as it is, always felt like it needed something extra added to it to close the argument that Jordan closed with nothing but the game itself. None of those readings are comfortable. All of them are worth sitting with seriously. What this really says about legacy in 2025. This story is not just about Clyde Drexler and LeBron James. Let's be honest about that. This is a bigger conversation about what legacy actually means in the world we live in right now. Jordan represented a specific idea about greatness, the idea that if you are truly the best, you do not have to tell anyone. The game tells them for you. The court is the only stage that matters, and the respect that comes from being genuinely undeniable, that kind of respect is permanent. It does not need maintenance. It does not need a press release. It just sits there, solid and unshakable, because everybody who saw it with their own eyes knows exactly what they saw. LeBron represents a different idea about greatness, that in the world as it exists today, greatness without a platform is greatness that only gets heard halfway, that the ability to control your own story is a form of power, that legacy in 2025 gets built in press rooms and production studios and on social media just as much as it gets built on the court. That adapting to the world as it is, rather than following rules from a completely different generation, is not weakness, it is intelligence. It is understanding that the game has changed and choosing to play the new version of the game. Both of those ideas make sense. Both of them have a real logic to them, but both of them also come with a cost that nobody wants to talk about openly, and Drexler is one of the very few people willing to name the cost out loud. The cost of Jordan's approach is that it demands an almost impossible level of pure dominance. You have to be so undeniable that no story management is necessary. Most people, even great players, cannot meet that standard. Not many players in the history of this sport ever could. The cost of LeBron's approach is that the machinery becomes part of the conversation. Every time someone talks about LeBron's legacy, the machinery is somewhere in the background.
The announcements, the media company, the carefully timed moves, and it keeps the argument open in a way that Jordan's legacy has never really been open. And here is the thing that Drexler pointed out that might be the most difficult truth in this entire conversation. The people who will decide where LeBron ultimately stands in history are not his fans. They are not the people who grew up watching him on social media and feel a personal connection to his journey. They are the players, the ones who competed against him, the ones who were on the wrong side of him on the court, the ones who know from personal experience what it felt like to go up against him at his best. And in that community, the one that carries the most weight when it comes to this specific kind of respect, things have never been as completely unanimous about LeBron as they were about Jordan. That gap is not huge, but it exists, and Drexler just put a very bright spotlight on it. The deeper question nobody wants to answer. Let's bring it all the way home, because after everything we have talked about, the deepest question in all of this is not really about basketball. It is about authenticity. It is about whether greatness can be built or whether it can only be recognized. It is about whether you can construct a legacy the way you build a brand, piece by piece, with strategy and intention, or whether legacy is something that the world gives you without being asked, because you gave it no other choice. Jordan made the world give it to him. He walked onto every court every single night, and he made the world give it to him. There was no asking. There was no managing. There was just performance after performance that was so overwhelming, so complete, so undeniable that the world had no option but to respond with pure respect. LeBron has played incredible basketball. He has had moments that belong among the greatest in the history of the sport. His career numbers are extraordinary. His longevity is extraordinary. By any reasonable measurement, he is one of the greatest players who ever lived. And yet, here we are in 2025, still having this conversation, still debating, still arguing about his place.
And the reason the conversation will not close is not about what he did on the court. It is about everything around it. Clyde Drexler did not say LeBron was bad. He said the path LeBron chose is not the same path that Jordan walked. And maybe in 2025, Jordan's path does not even exist anymore. Maybe the world changed so completely that playing it the old way is simply not possible. Maybe every athlete at that level today has to manage their story because the alternative is letting other people manage it for you in ways that are far worse. Or maybe, and this is the thing that keeps people up at night, maybe the old rules are the only ones that ever really mattered. Maybe authentic respect, the kind that does not need to be managed, the kind that just exists because the performance made it exist, maybe that is still the only version of respect that truly lasts. Final thoughts. Clyde Drexler lit a match in early 2025. He said out loud what a whole generation of basketball people have been saying quietly in private for years. He did not dress it up. He did not soften it. He put it on the table raw, and he walked away from the table without looking back. And the reason it is still being talked about, the reason it still makes people pick sides and argue and feel strongly one way or the other, is because it touches something real, something that goes all the way down to how we think about what greatness actually is and who gets to decide. Jordan gave us one version of what greatness looks like: clean, direct, undeniable, built entirely by performance and nothing else. LeBron has given us a different version: massive, impressive, carefully constructed, and still somehow, after all these years, not fully settled. Which version is real? Which version matters more? Which version will still be standing in another 50 years? Those are the questions Drexler asked. And honestly, the fact that those questions are still open at this point in LeBron's career, after everything he has accomplished, says more than any statistic ever could. So let me leave you with this. Can a legacy that was built with help from the machinery ever feel as real and as permanent as one that was built without it? Does the way it was built matter, or does only what was built matter in the end? Think about that seriously, because where you land on that question tells you exactly who you are as a basketball fan, and it tells you exactly how you feel about everything Clyde Drexler said. Drop your answer in the comments below. I read every single one. And if this video made you think, made you feel something, made you want to have the real argument, you know what to do.